Hello, and welcome. When we think of the American Revolution, one phrase comes to mind: no taxation without representation. This rallying cry is the most recognizable cause of the war. But the truth is, this conflict was about much more than just a protest against high taxes. It was a fundamental battle over the nature of power and the rights of the colonists. If you like this video, please subscribe and like it. It really helps our channel, and don't forget to click on notifications so you don't miss our new videos. Today, we're going to dig into the four major causes of the American Revolution, moving beyond the simple narrative to reveal a more complex and fascinating story. We'll explore the political and economic conflicts, the powerful new ideas spreading through the colonies, the diverse motivations of the people involved, and the international rivalries that turned a colonial rebellion into a global war. Political and economic nexus. To understand the political struggle, you have to go back to the 7 Years' War. It was a massive, global conflict, and while the British won, it left them with a mountain of debt. To pay for it, Parliament decided to do something new: impose taxes directly on the American colonies. But Parliament's justification for this was based on a concept the colonists simply did not accept. The British government argued for virtual representation. This theory claimed that members of Parliament represented the interests of the entire British Empire, including the American colonies, even though the colonists didn't elect them. The colonists, however, had a different view. For over a century, they had been governing themselves through their own colonial assemblies, which levied taxes with the direct consent of their constituents. They believed in actual representation, where a representative was directly accountable to the people in a specific, geographically defined area. This disagreement wasn't just a political squabble, it was a constitutional crisis. When the British imposed the Stamp Act in 1765, it was seen not just as a financial burden, but as an attempt to dismantle their established political systems. The colonists' frustration was articulated in the Stamp Act Congress's Declaration of the Rights and Grievances, which acknowledged the Crown's authority but rejected Parliament's right to tax them. Without their consent, the political grievances were inseparable from the economic ones. The British Empire operated under the system of mercantilism, which viewed colonies as sources of raw materials and captive markets for finished goods. The Navigation Acts forced colonial trade to be conducted on British ships and required certain goods to be exported only to Great Britain. This system, while offering a guaranteed market for some colonial goods, also stifled their economic autonomy. The colonists saw these economic acts as deliberate political affronts. The conflict escalated with a series of acts that moved from taxing trade to taxing everyday items. The Sugar Act of 1764 placed duties on luxury goods like molasses, coffee, and wine. This was followed by the Townshend Acts of 1767, which levied direct taxes on household staples like glass, lead, paper, and tea. This progression made the abstract concept of parliamentary overreach a tangible, daily grievance for every colonist. Ideological and social landscape. The revolution wasn't just fought with muskets, it was fought with ideas. The Enlightenment provided the intellectual framework for the revolution. Thinkers like John Locke, Montesquieu, and Jean-Jacques Rousseau introduced concepts of natural rights, life, liberty, and property, and the social contract. These ideas weren't confined to academic circles. They were debated in taverns and disseminated through a network of pamphlets, making complex political philosophy accessible to a broad audience. At the same time, the Great Awakening, a religious revival, was sweeping through the colonies. It encouraged a direct, personal relationship with God, bypassing the hierarchical structure of the church. This emphasis on individual moral agency translated into the political sphere, encouraging people to question all forms of authority they saw as unjust, including the British Crown. The Great Awakening also fostered the first true sense of intercolonial unity, as traveling preachers created a shared identity that transcended regional boundaries. The Enlightenment provided the intellectual language of liberty, while the Great Awakening provided the social and psychological catalyst. empowering ordinary people to act on their convictions and unite for a common cause. The revolution was also a complex civil war, fought by people with a variety of motivations. We often focus on the patriots, but what about the loyalists? They were a significant portion of the population who remained faithful to the crown. They feared that the push for independence would lead to social chaos and a more tyrannical government. For them, the British Constitution was the best guarantee of their rights and political stability. And what about African Americans? The war offered a precarious opportunity for them to fight for their own freedom. The British promised emancipation to those who joined their forces, which was a clear path to liberation for many. At the same time, African Americans also fought for the Continental Army in integrated units, with some, like those in the 1st Rhode Island Regiment, being promised freedom for their service. The bravery of individuals like Crispus Attucks and Peter Salem became symbolic of the fight for freedom. As Frederick Douglass would later articulate, the revolution presented a profound hypocrisy of fight for liberty that upheld the institution of slavery. The international stage, the American Revolution was never an isolated event. It was a single front and a global power struggle between European empires. France and Spain, in particular, saw the colonial rebellion as a strategic opportunity to weaken their longtime rival, Great Britain. French support began covertly in 1776, with the French crown funneling funds and supplies to the American rebels. The decisive moment came with the American victory at the Battle of Saratoga in 1777. This victory convinced France that the American cause was viable, and in 1778, they formally recognized American independence and signed the Treaty of Alliance. This alliance transformed the conflict into a global war. Spain's involvement was also crucial, but is often understated. They joined the war in 1779 as an ally of France, with the primary goal of reclaiming territories lost to Britain in the 7 Years' War. Spanish forces, under Bernardo de Galvez, launched a successful campaign along the Gulf Coast, which diverted British troops and naval resources, secured vital supply routes, and weakened the British hold on the American frontier. The Dutch Republic's involvement, while not a formal military alliance, was also significant. As a major commercial rival of Britain, the Dutch provided extensive covert aid, with Dutch merchants funneling arms and supplies to the Continental Army through their Caribbean colony of St. Eustatius. British frustration with this trade ultimately led them to declare war on the Dutch in 1780, further straining their military and naval resources. The entry of these European powers forced Britain to defend its colonies and trade routes across the globe. This strategic overextension was a vital precondition for the American victory, demonstrating that the Revolution was a crucial theater and a much larger, ongoing strategic conflict between empires. Catalyst moments. While these underlying causes had been festering for over a decade, specific events acted as catalysts, turning frustration into open rebellion. The most significant of these were the Intolerable Acts of 1774, passed by Parliament in response to the Boston Tea Party. These punitive measures were a direct assault on colonial self-governance. The Boston Port Act closed Boston Harbor until the East India Company was repaid for the destroyed tea, crippling the city's economy. The Massachusetts Government Act revoked the Massachusetts Charter and severely limited town meetings, placing the colony under effective martial law. The Administration of Justice Act allowed British officials accused of crimes to be tried in Britain, effectively giving them impunity from local law. Finally, the Quartering Act allowed British troops to seize and occupy uninhabited buildings at colonial expense. These laws were designed to isolate and punish Massachusetts, but they had the opposite effect. Their draconian nature resonated as a threat to all the colonies, galvanizing them to come to Massachusetts' aid. This led to the convening of the First Continental Congress and a unified resistance. The political standoff gave way to open conflict on April 19, 1775, at the battles of Lexington and Concord. The shot heard round the world became the symbolic beginning of the armed struggle. Legacy. The American victory at Yorktown didn't end the struggle for the new nation. The Articles of Confederation, the first governing framework, proved to be fundamentally flawed. The central government lacked the power to compel states to pay debts, raise a national army, or regulate interstate commerce. These failures led to the Constitutional Convention of 1787 and a series of critical compromises that shaped the new republic. The Great Compromise created a bicameral legislature with the House of Representatives, based on population, and the Senate with equal representation for each state. The 3/5 Compromise counted enslaved people for representation and taxation, greatly enhancing the political power of the southern states. The Commerce Compromise gave the federal government the power to regulate trade, directly addressing a major failure of the Articles of Confederation. As James Madison argued in Federalist No. 10, a large republic was the best way to manage the violence of faction by incorporating a greater variety of parties and interests, making it less likely for a single majority to gain tyrannical power. This shows that the founders' solution was a sophisticated response to the political divisions revealed during the Revolution. Conclusion. In the end, the American Revolution was a deeply complex event, rooted in an irreconcilable conflict over the nature of government and the rights of subjects. It was a political crisis driven by economic acts. It was a struggle fueled by a powerful mix of Enlightenment philosophy and religious revivalism that empowered ordinary people to act. It was a civil war that revealed a tapestry of motivations among patriots, loyalists, and enslaved peoples. And it was a crucial part of a global chessboard where the rivalries of European empires played a decisive role in the American victory. Understanding these interconnected causes gives us a richer, more accurate picture of how a protest over taxes transformed into a fight for liberty and the creation of a new nation. If you like this video, please like and subscribe.